A good while back, I ran into a few films and documentaries about Mexican Americans that really moved me. In the stories, I found a connection I'd rarely seen before, as much of the struggles and emotions portrayed were similar to those I'd hear from my mom who crossed over illegally from Mexico to California. They were a special watch, and when I looked into them, I found they were made by Robert M. Young, some white guy. I thought, why were they made by some white guy? It turned out Robert M. Young was a Harvard graduate, originally going in for English literature, turning into a documentarian and focusing his efforts in that field, landing him steady work with PBS. The partnership would lead to him filming an episode for their TV series, Come Over to My House, where he followed an immigrant family collectively working the fields for the hope of a better life. He titled it Children of the Fields, and like his other work, opted for a narrative style structure devoid of talking heads or any consistent place the family remains in, letting their intimately framed work and immediate search for a cheaper home speak for itself. Young openly speaks on the choice of filming Mexican Americans, acknowledging his place as a white man portraying brown issues, and explains he hoped to use his position to show Americans what had barely been documented at the time. He goes further to understand his place in his projects purely as a director, always bringing in separate writers and DPs to carry a lot of the poetic weight, allowing his peers, subjects, and sources to influence him greatly, something all of his collaborators, big and small, always agree with. The first of these narrative Mexican-American collaborations being his first feature film, winner of the Camera d'Or in 1978, Alambrista. Young looks to reality to express the emotions he portrays of his subjects, setting aside formalist techniques in favor of setting up his subjects provocatively in the real world. In Alambrista, he has actor Domingo Ambriz actually working in the fields amongst other immigrants with the camera work mimicking children of the fields and framing the personal struggle with handheld movements. In Andrew's writing of Andre Bazin, he explains Bazin's problematic but denser idea that film relies on the reality defined by an aesthetic of space, one that does not take the spectator into account. In Young's approach, he makes conscious choices in his narrative films that both acknowledge the work's artifice and accentuate the reality, an acknowledgement of the spectator and an enhanced sense of place because of its attempt to twist the idea. A simple technique being an unbothered approach to audio. Oftentimes, he won't lav up the actors and instead relies on an on-camera mic or boom op right by him, letting some dialogue, even important conversations involving the main character, be lost to the physical distance from the viewer. Another that stays prevalent in Alambrista and would come up in future works is the heavy reliance on natural lighting, using little to no artificial light for his films. Techniques similar to the ones in these previous works are brought together in 1982 when he would make the film I pitched to you today, The Ballad of Gregorio Cortez. It was the first American Western starring a Mexican protagonist played by the legendary Edward James Olmos, who's most popularly known for his role as Gaff in Blade Runner, Jaime Escalante in Stand and Deliver, and Abraham Quintanilla in Selena, further cementing his place in the Chicano movement's effect on the film industry while the funds for such movies were still in place. Filmed in a style nearly indiscernible from Young's documentaries and even closer to Alambrista's, it takes the run-and-gun approach from its predecessors and inserts it into the turn-of-the-century Texas. Based on the real-life event involving the Texas Rangers chasing down a Mexican man for killing the sheriff of El Carmen, the film revolves around racial violence, the condition of martyrs, and the heavy effects of mistranslation between language and culture. So much does it revolve around the latter that Young made the choice to have the half-Spanish spoken film screened entirely without subtitles. Coupled with Rashomon-style retellings of the events by several involved in the conflict, the dedication to filming where all of it happened down to the jail Cortez slept in, and the intense following of the source material with his pistol in his hand by Americo Paredes, the American History Society deemed it so accurate that the film itself is considered a historical document.